2024 Republican presidential candidate Vivek Ramaswamy hit out at CNN's Kaitlan after a contentious interview, tweeting yesterday, "Hilarious interview with CNN last night. Felt like I was talking to a petulant teenager." Now, if you remember, Kaitlan pressed Ramaswamy on comments he made suggesting 9/11 was an inside job. Let's look back at some of that interview.
Speaking of another comment that you've made that is getting attention today about 9/11, a report in The Atlantic that you gave an interview to, you said, quote, "I think it is legitimate to say how many federal agents were on the planes that hit the Twin Towers. Maybe the answer is zero. It probably is zero for all I know, right? I have no reason to think it was anything other than zero. But if we're doing a comprehensive assessment of what happened on 9/11, we have a 9/11 commission. Absolutely, there should be an answer the public knows the answer to." Explain to me what you meant there.
This is really, it's funny. I mean, The Atlantic is playing the same game as CNN. It's funny. What I said is on January 6th, I do believe that there were many federal agents in the field and we deserve to know who they are. On 9/11, what I've said is that the government lied. And this is incontrovertible evidence, Kaitlan. The government lied about Saudi Arabia's involvement. There was a Saudi spy named al-Bayoumi who they lied, and the government lied, and the 9/11 Commission lied. We know that because declassified reports in 2021 revealed that al-Bayoumi was indeed. What's that? Yeah,
the report that President Biden declassified. Yes. But your quote here, are you telling me that the quote is wrong
20 years later,
here?
Yeah.
But are you telling me that your quote is wrong here because it says how many federal agents were on the planes at the Twin Towers?
Yeah, when I actually, and this is just lifting the curtain on how media works again, I asked that reporter to send the recording because it was on the record. He refused to do it. But we had a free-flowing conversation. The truth is there are lies the government has told about 9/11, but it's not the ones that somebody put in my mouth. It's the one that I articulated.
Now, in a televised appearance yesterday, Ramaswamy appeared to walk back his comments by suggesting his statements were misinterpreted and taken out of context.
People should read it. There are a lot of September 11th families who feel that there was more Saudi involvement than we have been privy to. I think that the comments about federal agents on planes really sort of sent people sort of wondering what you were talking about.
You probably have experience with the left-wing media as well. The Atlantic's purposefully really scripted out something that was taken in a very different context.
Well, we just played your soundbite from there. But I want to ask you one more question.
However, Atlantic writer John Hendrickson, who originally published the story that contained interviews with Vivek Ramaswamy, maintains that he was not misquoted in his story, and he's got the transcripts and audio to show that. Let's play some of it.
What is the truth about January 6th?
I don't know, but we can handle it. Whatever it is, we can handle it.
But what
government agents, how many government agents were in the field? Right?
You mean like entrapment?
Yeah. Absolutely. Why can the government not be transparent about something that we're using? Terrorists, or the kind of tactics used to fight terrorists. If we find that there are hundreds of our own in the ranks of the day that they were, I mean, look.
Well, there's a difference between entrapment and a difference between a law enforcement agent
I think it is legitimate to say how many federal agents were on the planes that hit the Twin Towers. Like, I think we want it, maybe the answer is zero, probably is zero for all I know, right? No reason to think it was anything other than zero. But if we're doing a comprehensive assessment of what happened on 9/11, we have a 9/11 commission. Absolutely, that should be an answer the public knows the answer to.
So in case you weren't following that word for word, that was an accurate representation of how Kaitlan quoted him in their interview together. Now, in response to the audio release, Ramaswamy's communications director, Tricia McCullen, said in a statement, quote, "We are grateful that The Atlantic released the audio after we repeatedly asked them to do so. The audio clearly demonstrates that Vivek was taken badly out of context, and even this small snippet proves that." What do you make of that particular response? And can you characterize what you think in good faith her perception is or Vivek's perception is of the missing context here?
Look, I think in that interview, as demonstrated by the audio we just heard, Vivek went astray and said something about agents being on the planes, which is not an assertion I've heard anyone make before
And even he said it's probably not likely, but he's just asking questions, right? So the broader context, by the way, which we never get into, is he was talking about 1/6 and the fact that many people believe that it was an op, that there were federal agents that encouraged people to break into the federal building, and that it was by design, right? That the government did it. It really wasn't these individuals. They were basically set up. And so the implication is, were there federal agents on the airplane during 9/11? Is also, did the government also instigate that tragedy?
Right.
Which is a big claim to just be asking questions about. So I get that he, even in the context of his own quote, says, well, the number is probably 0. But there is some question as to why you would even raise that implication if you don't believe there's some possibility, some likelihood, in fact, that it would be true.
It doesn't sound like he does think that. He got a little over his skis answering this question, and it's not a good quote, and he's kind of walked it back, and I don't think it's that important. I mean, the media has been covering this like wall to wall. This feels very much like a gotcha. It's like a legitimate gotcha, because what he said in the transcript of that was not a good thing to say. It's a little outside the bounds. It's not well supported. It doesn't even sound like he thinks that. He was doing I'm asking questions, but it's right to ask questions and be skeptical, even about January 6th, which as our audience has heard my comments on the subject before, I absolutely lay the blame for it at Trump's feet. It is still the case that most of the people there were engaged in nonviolent First Amendment activity. It is the case that there was that Ray Epps individual, he was even shouted down by the other, patriot group around him, people saying, we need to go in. They're saying, nope, you're a Fed if you say that. And there is also a long history of entrapment-style police tactics against all sorts of politically disfavored groups, including white nationalist groups, patriot groups, militia groups. The Gretchen Whitmer kidnapping, the governor of Michigan, is beyond any shadow of a doubt has been shown to be definitively orchestrated by these militia members who are being paid to continue the plan by federal law enforcement so that they would be able to charge the people in the conspiracy.
Black Panthers.
That happens to Black Panthers. That happens to young Islamic teenage men on social media sites. Venting frustration, will be contacted by federal officers.
We understand,
which is what he was saying. He didn't say it. The way he brought in 9/11 planes was dumb.
Here's the problem.
Who cares?
I'm of two minds about this. If you really think that America did 9/11, there are plenty of people that agree with you, and go ahead and stand by it and make your case. If you have evidence, if you want to be a 9/11. Like I'm as a human being, my constitution is I'm open to a lot of conspiracy theories because that's the nature of conspiracy, and I know that the government does terrible things. Okay, but it's obviously ill-advised in the context of running for president when most people see 9/11 as one of the worst tragedies that have ever befallen America, to start speculating along those lines when, one, you don't have any evidence, and two, you don't apparently even believe it, and you crumble under even a little bit of pressure and pushback. So here's my question. I agree with you that it feels like a bit of a gotcha that is perhaps being milked if he just slipped up his words a little bit and people are trying to make a lot out of it because they don't like Vivek Ramaswamy and the liberal media, et cetera, et cetera. That is up to a point. The point at which he gets on Kaitlan Collins' show, and instead of just saying, you know what, I don't actually believe that there's anything untoward that happened with 9/11. There's no evidence for it. I was just making a broader point about why people believe in conspiracy theories. Instead of doing that, I'm sorry, he sneered and patronized Kaitlan Collins. He said she was a petulant child in the aftermath of that interview. He was, I'm sorry, very disrespectful and dismissive in a way that maybe is justified if you were correct. If you were correct and you're really getting railroaded and lied about on the liberal media. But in fact, she was simply asking you to justify and contextualize her comments, and you could have really made her look like she had egg on her face if you just said, look, I am running on a lot of things that are really important to the American people. I admit that this isn't one of them and not even something I'm especially committed to. Let's get back to the issues that matter.
Yeah. Instead
of trying to make it a manhood swinging contest with a reporter at a certain point, I'm sorry, to me, the biggest fault I would put on Vivek Ramaswamy in this is not getting out over his skis, as you put it, but choosing to come off as so hostile and domineering. When someone like RFK Jr., we've seen him in these situations, and to his credit, he says things like, you know what, I have to look into that. I'm not as familiar with that issue. I'm happy to reflect on that. I'll come back to you on that.
I mean, he was pretty thunderously upset. I mean, he didn't call anyone a petulant child, but about how his comments were misconstrued in the mainstream media.
I've never seen RFK Jr. behave that way to a member of the media. He's very critical of the media. He calls out their misrepresentations. I have never seen him. I've been watching many, many hours of RFK Jr. content. I have never seen him behave so dismissively to another human being in any context, no matter how adversarial these interviews are. I think that's part of why he was able to be so successful and be so much on the rise. And I am a little concerned. Vivek Ramaswamy has seen some success in polls in recent weeks, but there's some danger, I think, of him being as politically right in a way that is alienating to some of the Republican base as Donald Trump, without Donald Trump's kind of humor and charm, if you will. And also having the worst qualities of Ron DeSantis, where Ron DeSantis comes off as kind of peevish and unlikable in a lot of these media contexts, despite having some of Ron DeSantis' better qualities, like being more informed and articulate than, say, a Donald Trump. And there's a weird way where he could be pulling the worst of both of those, as well as some of the best of both of those. And I don't know how those are going to fight out in the long term.
Attacking CNN is obviously something that the Republican primary base enjoys. Ron DeSantis' big mistake there is not giving them any fodder, because he doesn't do enough mainstream interviews.
Even in that Fox interview at the end, the last clip that we played there, it felt like the Fox News host even was like, Vivek popped in with like, and the liberal media tried to get me, right? And she was like, well, here's your comments.
Well, but we'll see what I love that host, Martha McCallum. We'll see, what the viewers think, and what she thinks could be different things.
That's true. But I mean, at a certain point, if you have egg on your face, you were wrong. Like, he lied, Robbie. At the end of the day, he said that he was misquoted. That was not an accurate quote. Kaitlan Collins says on the show, is this an inaccurate quote? Like, she was giving him the benefit of the doubt. And he says, yes, it is. I was misquoted. And then there's a tape.
He should have just said, I'm sorry if I gave the impression that I thought like there were federal agents on planes. I absolutely don't think that.
Right.
If that's the impression you got, that's wrong.
Right.
That's not what I mean. I was just talking in general about how, we don't know the full story about a lot of subjects, January 6th, other things, maybe 9/11 as well. I don't trust the government in general.
Sure.
But I was not saying anything about that.
I get that.
Let's move on.
I get that.
That's how I would do it.
Well, I hope this is lessons learned, because he is on an upswing, and I do think there's a lot of appetite for his brand of politics out there. I'm just not sure making unnecessary enemies. Like the media, the corporate media, both liberal and conservative, makes enough mistakes and is biased enough. He referred to the Atlantic as left-wing. That's LOL, because the left can't stand the Atlantic because it's a neocon warmongering institution headed by Jeffrey Goldberg.
I'm the only person to the extent I'm on the right, who understands the difference between liberals, progressives, and the left.
But that's the thing, as
everyone else condenses
I'm
those
very
categories.
Skeptical, and kudos to you for that, Robbie. Yes. You're head above the rest. But it is a problem when I see people who are riling against these institutions in a way that they should, but in a way that seems to be trying to preserve the integrity of other corporate institutions that just happen to be on their side. If you're a conservative saying, I hate the corporate media, but I love Fox News, if you sound just like a liberal who's like, I hate Fox News, but I love the Atlantic.
Fox has taken a lot of heat from conservatives these days, though. Those people have a lot more integrity. But if they're mad at Fox simply because they fired Tucker and not because they have always been, like all of these institutions, corporate media that are beholden to advertisers and have the same kind of biases and built-in problems as all of it, well, then are you really upset at corporate media, or are you just upset at the guy you don't like, the politics you don't like? Well, that is what conservative media doesn't have. Conservative viewers and people don't have the same hostility to corporate media, right? Is an independent and left.
They say they do.
Yes, but not because it's corporate, because it's establishment and toes a mainstream narrative that is hostile to their worldview.
What does establishment mean? What motivates the establishment? That's a very good point, Robbie, because this is my fundamental problem with some of these right populists.
Yeah, well, it is a actual disagreement
Robbie,
and difference of opinion.
What is your politics? What makes the establishment bad? Is it just an empty word like elite? Or do you have a core idea of there's a group of people whose
pushing
interests,
policies that they think are harmful to them.
A core of people whose interests, whose motivations or political interests are fundamentally misaligned with yours because of their material status in this country.
Right. That is not what this side thinks. That's what your side thinks.
No.
It's a general disagreement.
I know the answer is no, Robbie, but I'm trying to make a point here. My point is that is why they are so frequently misled by people who create a fake version of politics that appeals to them and leads them exactly astray. That's why Donald Trump can get on the debate stage in 2016 and say a lot of good, true-sounding things about the swamp and then get into office and appoint all of these Wall Street tycoons and revolving door animals right back into the swamp that he said he was going to drain. And so my point is not, it's a rhetorical question I'm asking and imploring conservative viewers who I think have the right instinct to say at the end of the day, I'm going to agree with my politics, but if your problem is that people who work in industries then go and enter the government to regulate their own industries in a way that is self-serving and self-beneficial, if your problem is that the pharmaceutical titans and all of those people are writing our public policy and the government is corrupt, that is correct. But just saying the government is corrupt because it's the government, you're going to be exploited if you don't have an actual more sophisticated analysis of why it is that people you don't like aren't acting in your interest. And it's not just vibes. And the same thing I would argue is true when you're talking about media critique. People aren't just sitting around saying, oh, I just want to be evil. What is motivating people in having the approach that they have?
But it is genuinely different values because, not that I can speak on behalf of all conservative people or something, but conservatives have a different political ideology. It's not like they don't hate businesses or even very wealthy people just making money for its own sake. They don't
but that's not what I'm
stigmatize
saying.
or demonize that.
I agree. I understand that.
They don't want the government supporting progressive cultural, social, and economic values that they don't agree with.
I think
it's a fundamental different. I mean, a lot of these people want abortion to be illegal. They want
a lot of them
gay
don't.
marriage to be illegal.
Most of them do not.
What about conservative primary voters?
The overmajority of Republicans do not want gay marriage to be illegal. Gay marriage has flown the shark. Even Republicans don't try to. No, gay marriage has been enormously popular poll-wise for years now.
Among Republican primary voters?
Yes.
I think it's pretty close. And the vast majority of them are pro-life. I'm just saying there are different values. You can't say, well, Robbie, why? If they would just understand that the corporate media and corporations and their influence on government is bad. I mean, they agree that, but at the end of the day, they want fundamentally different policies.
I don't know. I feel like I said that explicitly. I explicitly said that I understand that there's a value gap. I'm not asking people to understand my values. But if you are waking up confused as to why, or you expect someone like Donald Trump to do what he said he was going to do. I'm not talking about my agenda. Donald Trump didn't fulfill his own agenda, his own promises to his constituency. You have to ask yourself reasons why. And so you don't get led down that same primrose path of false promises again and again. VIvek Ramaswamy, who is he as a person? How did he make his money? What does his entire life up to this point tell you about what his core values are? And then what do you expect him to do with those values when he gets into office? And are you going to use that as an indicator of how he's going to lead as a potential president? Or are you going to use the fact that he says, I hate the Atlantic, I hate the corporate media, as though someone who's spent his entire life from Harvard to Yale to the biopharmaceutical industry to being named an ESG world leader, he objects to that and asks them to take that down. But that is the world that he has been living in. And so I don't know, maybe people can change. But voters have to be clear-eyed about the likelihood of that given people's priors and the ideological commitments that they have made throughout their entire tenure before they started running for president.
Yeah, well, I'm not a big defender of him or something. If voters can make up their mind whether they believe his pivot, given some of that background that you elucidated, that is, as far as I can tell, is his actual background. That he was a World Economic Forum fellow or something like that. I mean, he has been denouncing ESG for a long time. Well before he was running for president.
I'm not trying to say this dismissively, but since he wrote this book, Woke Inc., and was promoting that book. Now, I'm sure he had the ideology before he wrote the book. That's why he wrote the book.
But
that's how he came onto the scene.
Just because you are an elite or you're well-educated or you worked in an industry that's profitable like the pharmaceutical industry doesn't automatically make you an enemy of conservative people. Maybe it automatically makes you an enemy of left populists.
No.
But it's what kind of influence are they exerting, and is it contrary to the policies that conservative people want?
I'm not talking about conservative people, not an enemy of conservative people. Is he going to be looking out for the interest of poor and working people? That's the question.
Right. It's a question for a left populist.
No, it's a question for poor and working people who are looking to vote for someone who's going to uplift their interests. And what poor and working people are going to have to ask is, do I care more about the woke politics, which if you care about that, I'm not trying to tell you you shouldn't. I don't, but God bless, that's your choice. But what the gamble of these people is, are you going to care more about that than the fact that he has a plan to cut Social Security and Medicare? If you go to Vivek Ramaswamy's website right now, he says he wants to end Lyndon B. Johnson's Great Society programs, the keystone of which is Medicare and Medicaid. I know what you think about it, Robbie.
We should do that.
You think that. But these are two of the most popular social programs in the world. Most of our grandparents, people who don't come from affluent families, are heavily reliant on these programs to not be destitute in the street they were before the 1950s. The elderly poverty rate was decimated by those great programs, and that is why so many people support them. Our elderly are very
wealthy, and I think even a lot of young conservative people are sick of the upward transfer of wealth and power to the elderly.
Robbie, the 1%, there is this glut of very wealthy elites that are sitting on these houses and making life miserable for everybody else. But the average American income is $50,000 a year. There's no most of anything in America that is very wealthy. People are struggling. We sit on the show every day and talk about how people are struggling. We talk about inflation and Bidenomics being crap and inflation being high because there's seniors on budgets that are trying to make do with cost of living adjustments that don't keep up, although Biden did help with that for seniors. We'll give him credit for that. And with prices of goods going up and with housing costs going up, and now they have to start paying their student loans back. The largest growing group of people that owe student debt.
Conservative people want them to pay back their loans.
Let me just make the point. The largest growing the largest growing population of people with student debt are seniors. So you can say that they deserve to. I'm not making a value argument. I know that you think that they should have to pay the debt, but this is the reality. People have to vote on their pocketbooks and what benefits them in life. So you can say they shouldn't vote in their self-interest, I guess, or maybe they value some of this other stuff more, and that's
voting
fair.
in their self-interest to just yes, voting in your self-interest to just take money from other people and give it to you or other people that's not a conservative value. Maybe that's a left populist value.
I don't qualify for student debt forgiveness. I made more than
I wasn't saying you specifically.
So I'm talking about someone's grandparent that might lose their Social Security benefits, their Medicaid, and their and have to, because of Joe Biden, to be clear, have to start paying perhaps hundreds of dollars a year, a month in student loan payments starting in the fall.
I don't think the conservative plan is to immediately end these programs, but to recognize that they are insolvent in the long run.
Vivek Ramaswamy, who we're talking about, specifically says one of his core plans on his website, if you go and Google it at VivekRamaswamy2024.com or whatever it is to cut Social Security and Medicaid. That's all I'm saying. I'm not trying to smear the guy. That's what he wants. And many of you out there want that as well. But many of you don't. Polls suggest, the popularity of the program suggests that many of you don't want that at all. And so the question is, are you being misled by someone who is willing to give you the cultural fodder that you want because it doesn't hurt them, their bank account, their ability to become a billionaire at age 37, multimillionaire, at the age 37, through the biopharmaceutical industry and deregulation and all of the things that benefit the very wealthy in this country? Maybe you like that. Maybe you're hoping it'll trickle down to you. Maybe you hope that you also can make money that way.
And conservative people believe that deregulation benefits everyone because then the good, the service, the drug, whatever it is, costs less money and there's more competition and there's less industry capture for one specific.
God bless. If you believe that, that's fine. But the question fundamentally is going to be, are you going to take someone who says there are two genders? Is that going to feed you at night? Is Vivek Ramaswamy declaring as part of his 10, what do you call it?
Platform.
10 Commandments. No, he has this. He calls them the 10 Commandments, and he reads through them at some of his events. The first one.
Those are the rules that God gave Moses in the desert.
Yes, I'm familiar with what they are. VIvek Ramaswamy's version includes not "thou shalt not covet another man's wife" or "thou shalt not murder," but there are two genders. Fine. If that is very, very important to you, all due respect, that's fine. But what he is hoping, what candidates like that are hoping, in my humble opinion, is that you care more about someone owning the libs by saying that there are two genders than you being able to age into old age and having health insurance.
Yeah, I think only believing there's two genders is obviously very important to the right, but it's not just that. And there is a whole base of right-wing Republican people who are not you're making it sound like you think they're secretly leftist, except they hate wokeness.
No,
so they'll never
I don't
recognize
think they're
they
secretly
actually
leftist,
support
Robbie.
a left
I do
populist
think they
policy.
want healthcare
They
as
want
seniors.
lower taxes and less regulation, and they want the government programs to be not non-existent, but to be fair. You pay into them, and you get what you paid. You get that eventually, and fair to everyone. And structured differently, not in a way that benefits. It overlaps with some left-wing populism because they don't want to structure it in a way that benefits massive pharmaceutical companies or anything like that.
You don't have to make this argument because I don't believe that they're leftist. What I do believe is 9 out of 10 Americans who receive Social Security have a very or somewhat favorable opinion of the program. The number for Medicare benefits is 84%.
It's going to be broke by the time the people paying into it now would get any benefits.
And 55% of Republicans.
That's just we have to deal with that.
55% of Republicans, according to a 2021 Gallup poll, support same-sex marriage. So a majority of Republicans at this point.
I support same-sex marriage, and I have no problem with a minimal welfare state to take care of the people who most need help. But it's not even particularly conservative to say these things obviously need some restructuring because there's massive waste and the costs are not controlled. But all right, we went way longer than we were supposed to on that one. More Rising after this.